My name is Jennifer Linder. I am a developmental psychologist and a professor of psychology at Linfield University. My research area of expertise is the effects of media on child and adolescent development. I am also a parent. I have 2 college-age children, so I have personal experience with the challenges of raising children in the digital age. Today, I'm going to be providing you some education about healthy development and resilience in youth, and some of the research on how smartphone use may impact development. What is resilience? Resilience is the ability to adapt when faced with challenges. It is typically studied in at-risk children who have high levels of adversity in their environments from very early in life. But what is less talked about is resilience in more normative environments where children have lots of opportunities for healthy development. Even for these children, resilience is important because it allows individuals to cope effectively when they do face challenges and fail. I'm going to be using the analogy of a child as a tree. When the wind blows and things get stormy, a resilient child is still able to remain standing. They will bend, but not break. I'm going to start with some background on development. What would be indicators of healthy development in childhood and adolescence? This list is not all-inclusive, but I will mention some key indicators. First, we have physical health. This is not just the absence of illness, but also the absence of markers that put someone at risk for early death or chronic illness, such as high blood pressure or obesity. Second is the absence of aggression and delinquency. This one is probably obvious. Healthy children are not hurting others or engaging in illegal behaviors. Next, we have age-appropriate autonomy. This is often overlooked by parents, but is considered critical by developmental psychologists. Autonomy means the child can do things independently. For example, they can problem solve without immediately needing assistance. In adolescence, this also includes some separation from the family, some risk-taking, and experimentation with pushing boundaries. It also includes resistance to peer pressure. This is a form of autonomy as well because it indicates that one can make decisions independent of the peer group. Next is academic success. This is the eagerness to learn and having the skills to learn. It also includes attending school, so low truancy. This doesn't have to mean straight A's and college bound. It can simply mean successfully completing high school and being prepared to enter a trade. Next is the absence of mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and eating disorders. Finally, we should see healthy peer relationships. This includes acceptance by peers, high-quality friendships, and eventually healthy romantic and sexual relationships. So where do these characteristics come from? They don't just magically appear. These things grow from nourishment provided by the roots of the tree. And this is where resilience comes from. It's the roots that keep us standing despite the storms we might encounter. So what factors contribute to the growth and nourishment of the roots? I'm going to start with some activities that are necessary for healthy development. These include sleep, exercise, and play. Play is not just a pastime. There is extensive literature on the importance of play for cognitive, social, and emotional development. A lot of cognitive skills are also needed for healthy development, but one of the most important is attention, which is the ability to remain focused. Attention develops gradually through childhood and adolescence as the brain develops. Next are skills related to emotions and self-control. One is tolerance of negative emotions. This refers to the ability to tolerate unpleasant feelings like boredom, sadness, and frustration. Emotion regulation is also important. This is the ability to manage negative emotions so that you can function and achieve your goals. For example, controlling your anger when arguing with a friend so that the conflict can be resolved. Another important skill is delay of gratification, which is the ability to resist short-term rewards in favor of a larger or more enduring benefit later. In other words, not always needing instant gratification. Young children are terrible at this, but it should develop as they age, and it can be taught. Finally, healthy development is the result of factors that nourish social relationships. One is having knowledge of healthy relationships. Youth can't have them if they don't know what they look like. Self-worth, having high self-esteem, which develops through social relationships with others, is also important for healthy development. Social connections, such as friendships, are also needed. Finally, youth need to have a sense of belonging, which means feeling connected to a peer group, family, and the larger community. So now we have the roots that nourish healthy development and resilience. But how did these roots develop? The roots develop through a process called socialization, which is the teaching of values, behaviors, expectations, and skills to children. What are the socializing agents in children's lives? Who and what socializes children? The first source of socialization is the child's family. Children are also socialized by peers who teach them values and behaviors. Schools, including teachers, can be a socializing agent. Another place children get socialized is through extracurricular activities such as dance, sports, 4-H, and church. Finally, youth are socialized by the media. For many generations now, there has been media, such as television and video games, but now it is omnipresent in our pockets in the form of smartphones, which include access to TV, video games, the entire internet, social media, and artificial intelligence. This next slide is a quote I used to use 20 years ago when I was giving talks to parents about TV effects on children. I use this quote to emphasize that parents are often not really paying attention to or monitoring what children see on screens relative to monitoring their experiences outside of the home. Parents have to realize that there is a stranger in your house. If you came home and you found a strange man teaching your kids to punch each other or trying to sell them all kinds of products, you'd kick him right out of your house. But here you are, you come in and the TV is on and you don't think twice about it. I think this quote is just as relevant today, but I have taken the liberty of modernizing it. Parents have to realize that there is a stranger in your child's pocket. If you came home and you found a strange man teaching your kids to punch each other or trying to sell them all kinds of products, you'd kick him right out of your house. But here you are, you hand them a smartphone, and you don't think twice about it. So how much time are you spending with the strangers in their pocket? These statistics are from a national survey of children ages 11 to 17. 43% of tweens own a smartphone. About 50% of children own one by age 11, and ownership jumps to 88 to 95% for teens. A 2025 survey that just came out found that 40% of children have a tablet by age 2, and nearly 1 in 4 have a personal cell phone by age 8. As far as how much they are using it, the median, which is the middle response right in the middle of the range of responses given, is 4.5 hours a day. But just under 10% of the sample reported using their smartphone 10 hours or more a day. The median number of notifications received per day was reported to be 237. If you assume that most of these notifications happen during waking hours, let's say 18 hours a day, this translates to approximately 1 notification about every 4 to 5 minutes. Finally, youth were asked to estimate the number of times a day they picked up their phone to check it. There was quite a range from 2 times a day to 498 times a day, with a median of 51. Youth are not just using their phones during leisure time. Almost 100% say they use them during school hours. The wide range of time reported using phones during school is a reflection of the variation in school district policies and enforcement of phone use during the school day. This survey also asked how often youth use their phones on school nights. To me, this means between dinner and bedtime, but they define school nights in the survey as midnight to 5 a.m. Over half of youth are using their phones essentially in the middle of the night before they go to school the next day. So what are youth doing on their smartphones? Mostly social media. They are also viewing pornography on their phones, often in school and on school devices. Other research has revealed that 54% of children age 13 and younger have seen online pornography, and 15% of children age 10 or younger have seen it. How might all this smartphone use be impacting development? Here's the question of concern to parents and researchers. In what ways does smartphone use interfere with the development of foundational skills needed for healthy development and resilience? If you ask people this question, they have many concerns, but what does the research say so far? That is what I want to share with you today. I want to point out that this research is based on the generation of youth that didn't get their first smartphone until their teen years. These findings might look very different in subsequent generations who were introduced to screens at much younger ages. Concerns about smartphones can generally be divided into 2 types. First, there are concerns about the properties of smartphones. Instant reward and feedback. With smartphones, you don't ever have to wait very long to get anything. Ease of information. Google and AI will tell you anything. You don't need to have to work hard to find information. Addictive properties. App designers use the principles of the psychology of addiction to make it very difficult to stop using them. Notifications and alerts from our phones fragment our attention and interfere with our ability to focus on one thing. Second, there are concerns about content that youth are exposed to on their phones. This slide contains a list of typical content concerns that parents have that have also been extensively researched. Let's move on to specific research findings regarding the impact of smartphones on the routes needed for healthy development. There's been a lot of research on displacement of activities needed for healthy development, meaning if youth are on their screens, what do they not have time to do? I want to note that these citations are not single studies, rather they are review papers, each of which summarize the results of anywhere from 60 to 100 studies. Research has shown that increased screen use is associated with less exercise. We also have research on play and screens in very young children. This research has revealed that infants and toddlers play less and play quality is lower when adults are using their phones or screens are even on in the background. Others have noted that there was a national trend in the reduction of recess time in the years leading up to the introduction of cell phones, which further reduces playtime for youth. Finally, screen use is associated with less sleep. I want to talk about that a little bit more. We know that smartphone use interferes with sleep and that most youth are not getting enough sleep. We also know that the majority of youth have a screen in their bedroom and bring their smartphones to bed with them. One problem is that the blue light from smartphones disrupts the circadian rhythms that regulate our sleep and wake cycles and the release of melatonin, which helps you fall asleep. Other research has shown that young children are the age group that is actually the most sensitive to blue light. Phone makers responded by adding features allowing you to change the lighting on your phone in the evening hours to reduce the blue light. However, this doesn't solve the problem of sleep disruption because there is a second reason that smartphones disrupt sleep, and that is the content viewed on phones. One study with adolescents found that using social media before bed increased mental stimulation. They were thinking about and worrying about what they had seen, which in turn disrupted their sleep. Let's turn to smartphone effects on attention, which I noted is a really important cognitive skill for healthy development. There has been quite a bit of research on media multitasking. Media multitasking refers to doing multiple things with media at the same time. For example, scrolling while texting friends or having multiple tabs open in a web browser. Most youth claim that they are very skilled at this, but this is known as the multitasking myth. Engaging in high levels of media multitasking is associated with a host of problems. Ironically, a study with 8th graders found that high media multitaskers struggle the most with tasks that require them to do multiple things at the same time. Okay, so we have evidence of smartphone use damaging some of our roots. What about potential impacts of smartphone use on emotional skills? I want to start with tolerance for boredom. There was a fascinating study published in 2014 in the Journal of Science. The researchers asked adults to spend 6 to 15 minutes in a room alone with nothing to do. In the room, they had a machine that allowed them to administer low-level shocks to themselves, painful but not harmful, and all of them agreed the shock was so unpleasant that they would pay money to avoid it in the future. Despite this, 67% of men in the study and 25% of the women chose to shock themselves rather than simply being alone with their thoughts for a few minutes. I want to remind you that these were adults in 2014, so they did not grow up with smartphones. I would predict that these rates would be much higher for youth raised with smartphones who virtually never have to sit and do nothing. This study was the inspiration behind my current line of research, which looks at what happens when youth use screens to cope with negative emotions such as stress and boredom. So far, we have found that when adolescents report using media to deal with negative emotions, such as using their phones to try to feel less sad or to avoid thinking about their problems, they also report being lower on several traits necessary for persisting in the face of challenge and difficulty. In other words, they exhibit less resilience. In a study we published last month, we found that social media use among college students was associated with lower levels of skills needed to face academic challenges, which in turn predicted lower grade point averages. This trend of children using screens to regulate their emotions is really alarming to me. In a new study that just came out this morning, 17% of parents reported that their child sometimes or often uses a mobile device to calm down when feeling angry, sad, or upset. And 20% of kids age 8 and under watch or play on a device every night or most nights in order to fall asleep. There is also evidence that delay of gratification, that ability to wait for a reward that is important for resilience, is also impacted by screen use. One study found screen time was associated with lower delays of gratification in 4-year-olds. So now we have even more roots being damaged. Finally, let's talk about smartphones and relationships. I want to mention pornography because this is a striking example. Youth are not only watching porn, but they consider it an important source of information about romantic relationships and sex. Youth are not seeing realistic or healthy models of relationships. Pornography is clearly something we do not want children seeing. But what about social media use? We do have a lot of research on different social media apps. Here are just some of the negative outcomes associated with TikTok use. I want to emphasize that these are problems associated with problematic TikTok use, meaning using it so much that it interferes with other activities such as school and sleep. Another recent review of 73 studies of youth ages 10 to 19 found that heavy users of social media were at increased risk of engaging in a variety of unhealthy behaviors, such as substance use, risky sexual behaviors, delinquency, and gambling. Other negative outcomes associated with excessive social media use include high levels of fear of missing out, loneliness, increased risk of self-harm, and being the victim of online aggression. This may seem like a bleak picture, but I want to emphasize that almost all of these studies look at problematic use or compare high versus low users of social media. Lower levels of use are usually not as concerning. In fact, not only does social media not always have negative effects, but it can have benefit. There is evidence that social media use can be especially beneficial for youth who are marginalized or struggle with social interactions. Online platforms allow them a way to connect and feel less lonely. So why are there different effects of social media use? Research shows that it depends on who is using it and what they are using it for. Here are a few factors that can alter the effects of social media use. First, the gender and age of the user matter. On average, use by early adolescent girls and slightly older boys is most risky. Therefore, psychologists suggest waiting until your child is older to allow social media use, at least high school age. Second, it is important to be aware of what your child is using social media for. Researchers distinguish between passive use, which is simply scrolling and viewing others' content, and active use, which includes things like sharing content and messaging with others. Passive use is associated with more negative effects, whereas active use appears to have more benefits. Finally, individuals vary in what we call social comparison tendencies, which is the degree to which one tends to compare themselves to others on things such as physical appearance and life experiences. For youth who are inclined to compare themselves to others, there is an increased risk of negative effects of social media use. To summarize, the research suggests, for at least some, if not many, smartphones may negatively impact the social experiences needed for resilience. So where does this leave us? How can we raise healthy children in the digital age? You have taken the first step by watching this video. You now have more knowledge. The other important thing to remember is that the solution is not simply taking phones away. Other solutions include being mindful of screen use in ourselves and our children. We can also nourish the roots by adding what we call protective factors to children's lives. Protective factors are things that help children develop resilience. Here are just a few protective factors that have been identified by research. I encourage you to reflect and discuss with others what can you do as parents and a community to promote resilience in our youth. I am confident that together we can raise resilience in our kids.